Hi, YouTube fans. This is Matt of Post April 6th YouTube channel. Well, how are you this evening? All I can tell you is if you're having a bad day, all I got to say is I'm sorry. But me, I am happier than happy. And here's the main reason why. One, not only is it the start of me having 2 to 3 days off from work, and here's something that would be neck and neck and equal with number one, and in some ways have more worth and more advancement than number one. I am still alive 15 years after I had a very deadly, well, not deadly, literally, but near-death experience. It was very tragic. And I'm referring to April 6th, 2011. Before I talk about the accident itself, why don't I talk about what happened earlier in the day? Okay. So, I left my apartment at the Glen Apartments in Building 2, somewhere between either 11:40 or 12:40 p.m., meaning 11:40 a.m., 12:40 p.m., in order to walk 1.2 to 1.3 miles to SURGERIES Hardware, because I was a cashier for that company and I'd been there for 9 years by that time. And I went into work, and basically I may not have had the best day, but I had a good day. And right after 8 p.m., somewhere between 8 p.m. sharp and 8:03, I left the building because, the store was closed. It was time for us to go home. And I walked across the parking lot of what was then Tamarack Square Mall, which was soon to be Tamarack Square Shopping Center, because the mall was there was already plans a few months after that to have it demolished, which has already happened by now, because where the indoor mall was has been totally demolished, and there's a Super Target store there now. So once I got through the parking lot, I waited at the crosswalk to cross Hamden this way, heading north. And then when I got to the intersection where they meet about like this, I walked 75 to 100 feet down Tamarack because too many people were crossing the street and not stopping first. Because one, there's a blind spot, and two, it's low traffic, and three, a lot of people were messing with their cell phones or just didn't think that there was much of a consequence to cross the street because they'd look for a split second and they'd cross. And right by the second tree that, again, was about 50 to 75 feet away from the street corner itself, I crossed the street this way. And quite unfortunately, what happened was, even though I ran, the next thing I know, I am flying through the air I mean, it wasn't literally this way, but physically it felt this way. I felt like I was physically flying through the air at a speed in excess of 2,000 miles per hour. And I went from standing on a paved street to flying through the air in darkness, like that fast. Like it happened all within about a half a second. In fact, it may have been like a tenth of a second. Then about a second later, I remember the faint sound of thump. In fact, I'll use this book to try to imitate it. It was a faint sound roughly about this loud. Or about this loud. And then after that, it was total darkness, pitch black, and silence. I remember soon after that, I don't remember feeling any pain, but I remember being in a very dimly lit apartment that I thought was where I was living. And I was thinking to myself something like, well, I must have fallen asleep right after I got home. And then I remember having this, like I was hearing it from a distance, about people having a discussion about me, about that I went to sleep early because I was just so tired from working at the hardware store that I needed the rest. Something to that effect. It was like a man and a woman discussing this, meaning husband and wife. And then I remember having a dream that I had opened a new salad buffet restaurant that was a little different than the second dream I had about a salad buffet restaurant. And I called a friend of mine to tell him all about it. He says, yeah, that's a good idea. Even though the economy's bad right now, he says, that'll help you make a lot of money. Good idea. And I talked to him about it. He says, yeah. And then he kind of interrupted. He says, look, we'll talk more some other time. You got some work to do, and I got a lot of work to do, so I got to go. Bye. And the call ends. The phone call ends. And then after that, the dream ends. Now, here's what happens in the next dream that was partially based on reality. I had a dream that I was in this salad buffet restaurant that was located in Tamarack Square Mall. No, not Tamarack Square Mall. Why did I say that? I'm sorry. Cherry Creek Indoor Mall. Not Cherry Creek Shopping Center, Cherry Creek Indoor Mall. And in the dream, I remember walking from one end of the restaurant to the other. And as I'm walking through the restaurant, I'm looking at the walls. And on the walls, I don't really remember what the decorations were, but I do clearly remember this. The walls weren't painted white or like a color other than white, regular latex paint. It was walls that had gray suede fabric wallpaper that was done by a highly skilled professional that was put on the wall. I mean, it was so good, it looked like the wall was somehow custom made that way, instead of just having really good wallpaper on it. And then, after looking this way at the wall, and then looking straight forward with my head looking straight ahead like this, I had to get out of the way because there was 2 waiters and 1 waitress having large server trays that were full of these side plates that had double-decker sandwiches, grilled ham sandwiches, and Reuben sandwiches that they would hand out to customers. And then when I got to the other end of the restaurant, and after I'd walked past what's called the salad buffet island, there is this brick wall that has, it's like a light red, it's not pink, but it's a light red with white frosting effect. And that wall was cut open so that shelves that were this thick and like probably about 18 to 20 inches, well, actually not 20 inches, but 12 to 18 inches long, that were worked into that area that was cut open by a highly skilled masonry carpenter professional. On top of these thick mahogany dark wood shelves, there was salad dressings you couldn't get anywhere else. Special, really tasty bread spreads you couldn't get anywhere else. They weren't like jellies and jams. They were special bread spreads for like lunches and dinners, not for breakfast, or as a sweet snack or like a dessert. And then there was these bottles that were pretty tall, at least 12 to 14 inches tall. And inside these bottles, these were glass bottles, these weren't plastic, there was a special chicken marinade that cost $28.95. And then I go just a little bit over this way, away from that wall, and up against a black, what's called storm door iron fencing. There were these hampers that were huge. I mean, they were at least 1.5 to 2 feet tall, that held French bread, loaves of French bread. And 2 of the 3 baskets were empty. And I remember going into the stock room to get a really large basket that had loaves of French bread in it. And I'm stocking it, I'm moving my hands like this, trying to get the hampers stocked up as quick as I can. When I'm almost finished, I actually hear my father's voice. And he says to me, in a certain tone of voice, he says, "Well, you wouldn't ignore me if I were Penguin the cat," because I had a cat with that name. And I turn around and I look at him, and I put my hands over my eyes like this, and I really start crying. And then he says, "Come on, I'm just teasing you." And he says, "You're not going to talk to me?" And then he says, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? Why are you acting like this? You're going to get in big trouble with your boss standing there crying like that. What's the matter? What's going on with you? You don't usually act like this." And then I take my glasses off, and I go like this, and I go about like this, and I go like this, and I turn my body around, and I really keep crying, and I'm shaking my head about like this. And he says, "Well, aren't you going to tell me what's wrong? Aren't you going to talk to me?" Why can't you talk to me? I don't understand. Then the dream ends. Here's what was really going on for real. Just before the dream started, I hear my father say, "Hi, Matt," in that tone of voice, that nice, happy tone of voice he has. And I kind of cracked one of my eyes open, and I could see him, but I couldn't see him very clearly. Here's the reason why I couldn't see him very clearly. I was in an induced coma, and I very slightly came out of it, and I mean slightly. And he probably got a little bit closer to me. And what he was doing was he was talking to me to be kind and to show love for me. But what he was saying to me for real and what was said in the dream were probably two different things. And the shirt that he was wearing in the dream was a ocean blue Hawaiian shirt with white hibiscus flowers that he actually owned, that he wore at least once a week or once every couple of weeks. And the shirt that was in the dream and the shirt he was actually wearing, probably the same shirt. Meaning a white, an ocean blue short sleeve Hawaiian shirt with white hibiscus flowers. Yep. And I believe that the reason why I acted out in that movie, or excuse me, not movie, the reason I acted out the way I did in that dream was this. One, I knew he was there, but I couldn't talk to him, and I felt really stressed out and emotionally perplexed. Two, I was actually in a coma and I didn't know it. And having that dream and the way the dream went before I heard his voice meant something. What it really meant was I felt like there was a bit of a void in my life because I didn't have a job that I would like to have in working in Cherry Creek Mall. Two, I was in an induced coma and I wasn't out and about being a normal person. I was confined inside a hospital and I had limits on what I could do. And I mean a lot of limits. In fact, after I said that, come to think of it, it's more like this. I was confined to a hospital, I was in an induced coma, and there was nothing I could do. Nothing. Because that's pretty much how things are. I mean, sure, I could wiggle my hands like this if for some reason my body wanted to do it, but would a nurse come over and tell me to do it? No, because here's why. While you're in an induced coma and they talk to you, you're not gonna hear them, because it's more than the fact that you're asleep. You're actually half dead. It's the truth. When you're in an induced coma, or you become comatose because you get so heavily ill physically, when somebody talks to you, you're not going to respond because you are not aware of the fact that they're actually talking to you. It's the truth. Yeah. And would I wiggle my toes? Possibly. But did I? I don't know. And will I call them up and ask them that question? Well, I could, but here's what their response would most likely be. I'm sorry, sir, we don't... Your records are archived far away, and I don't have access to that information, sir. I'm sorry, I don't. I would fill out a form with Denver Health medical records and request a copy of all your medical records be sent to you. However, whatever format that you would get it, either Xerox copies that would be sent to you U.S. mail, or as a file that you could only pull up in your computer, a Word file. That's pretty much how they'd respond. Okay, so here's what happens, and I don't know the exact date verbatim that this happened, but it was presumably somewhere between April 24th and April 28th. This is a day that I wake up out of an induced coma. And I remember, as I'm waking up out of an induced coma, and I'm laying flat on my back, I'm feeling, if it wasn't this hand, it was this hand, and I'm feeling the back of my head like this, or I'm feeling both, I'm feeling from here to here. In fact, let me try to figure something else out so I can get more of a exact, accurate type of description. Okay, I went into the bathroom, and this is the best I can do. I feel about like this, from here to here, because the oh God, let me do it with the other hand. The staples went from about here to here, about like this. Yeah, when I had my head up against the mirror, even though it's a fact, it's hard to believe I'm bald back there. It's true. It feels like there's hair. There's a little bit of a thin spot, but I'm actually bald. Okay. So then, okay. So anyways, I'll keep going on with what happened the day the moment I wake up. Then after that, I start going like this, about like that. And what I was actually feeling was, this way there was a halo brace, and what was wrapped around the halo brace was gauze bandage. And then I was feeling the top of my head about like this, and the top of my head felt soft, and I couldn't figure out why. Here's what I found out after I got released from the hospital, because while I was in the hospital, they wouldn't tell me, because one, it would be an ethics violation of the nurse or clinical person or doctor to tell me. What it actually was why the top of my head felt soft. The cap of my skull was gone. It wasn't like gone and discarded and disposed of. It was gone because the fact it was surgically removed and it was stored away, and they kept it out for a certain amount of time before they surgically put it back. Okay, and then after that, I go like this. There's a ventilator tube sticking out, about like this. Then after that, I feel them down here. There's a tracheotomy tube sticking out, like, same as a ventilator tube, about like that. Right about there. Then after that, I go like this. And right about here, there was a feeding tube in my stomach. Here's proof of it. See that? And then I just started looking around the room like this. I just keep doing that for about at least 3 to 4 minutes. And my head got so tired, I didn't faint, But what did happen was it go about like this. And there was so much brain fluid in my head, it felt like a jug of water was inside my head. When it was not a jug of water, it was brain fluid. And when I went like this, it felt like this was going on inside my head. Or like this. I hope that shows up on the microphone through my smartphone. So then after that, the nurse comes in and she does the medical care procedures that she has to do and that she's permitted to do. And then after that, I'm laying there and I'm just kind of looking around about like that. And looking at, what's in this arm, what's in that arm, and looking at my hands, and then I fall asleep. And what happens next? I better not say his full name because even as kind as he is, he may not like that. Well, I'll say his first name. It's Bruce. It was a man who was, at the time, he was senior pastor of Christ Community Church before he retired in 2017. He comes in and visits with me, and he prays for me. And then he visits with me just a little bit more, and then he gets up and he leaves. You see, when somebody comes in, unless they're my father, they're advised by what would be a charge nurse or whoever would have to, kind of politely warn them about it, that they can only come and visit for 2 minutes, then they have to leave. The only exception to the rule where someone could come in for longer than 2 minutes would probably be my father, and he's only allowed to stay for 5 minutes back then. And then, let's see, it felt to me like it was only about 2 to 3 minutes, about 5 minutes, when it was actually more like a half hour to an hour. My friend Tom comes in from Lakewood. He's a very deeply religious Southern Baptist. He worships at a Southern Baptist church, and he prays directly to the Lord at home all the time, quite a bit, or wherever he is, quite a bit. And then I probably fell asleep at least for an hour, half hour to an hour, or an hour and a half to 2 hours. And a man who is now deceased, I can say his name because he's deceased and it doesn't really matter anymore. A man who's a retired detective for Denver police named Dennis Salazar comes in and visits with me. And I could tell by looking at him, he wasn't feeling good at all. His face was really thin and gaunt, and his face was sucked in, and his eyes were drooping like this, and here was white. Quite sadly, he was dying of pancreatic cancer. And then I remember falling asleep, and when I slept, gosh, I probably slept for a minimum of 6 to 8 hours. And some other people come in and visit with me before I fell asleep, now that I think about it. One was Mitch and Cheryl. They worked at the, Cheryl was the co-owner of the Ace Hardware that I worked at. And Mitch was a guy who came and helped out periodically because they were husband and wife. And then Brad comes in. And then I fall asleep after that. And what happened after that, I just don't remember because this was 15 years ago. And I remember some other people come in and visit. After about roughly, what was approximately 3 days, 3 days or 4 days, my father comes in to visit with me. And I was laying on my side, and all I could do was reach out and shake hands with him because he knew before he came into the room. I was going to have a ventilator tube in my mouth, and I wasn't going to be able to say a word. Yeah, he knew all along. And he was really happy to see me with my eyes open, able to visit with him. Yep. And I had a mustache and a full beard. I mean, one of those thick ones where I looked like a mountain man or a caveman. I did. You know, because I grew it when I was in the coma. And then he comes in again, I would say about 2 to 3 more days later. And what I did was I made a hand gesture like this. Like I wanted to write something down that I had to ask him. And he goes, oh, all right. He says, well, and he looks in the chest of drawers, or no, excuse me, a night end table or night table next to my bed. It's more like a nightstand. You know, it's narrow with 3 drawers. And he pulls out a packet of papers that's about this thick. It's got about 5 to 6 pages on it. And he turns it upside down, and he hands me his pen that's in his pocket. And I wrote down the question I asked him. The question was to the effect, how do I write a letter to Penguin? And then he takes the pen and paper away and he writes down his email address. And then the next question I asked him is, have you received a package from Schulte Pipe Repair? And then he looks at it and says, no, I haven't received a package from them or any type of package for you yet. He says, is there anything else you want to ask me? And I go, like this. He says, okay, give me the pen back. And I gave it back to him. And then he talked a little bit more, and then he had to get up and leave. Because he was on a time limit of about 5 minutes. Let's see. I would say after I'd been out of a coma, induced coma for at least 6 days, they took the ventilator tube out, and I wake up with nostrils in my nose. I think it's called cannular or whatever. I mean, they had to do that. And then, about 1 to 2 days later, my father comes in and visits with me, and I was happy to be able to talk to him. And I begged and pleaded with him to find a doctor for me, or talk to someone about being me released. And he looks at his flip phone and goes, nope, I'm sorry, I don't got the number. I can't help you, I'm sorry. What he really wanted to say to me, but he was not allowed to, was, Matt, I'm sorry. You're too sick to leave yet. I can't persuade the hospital to let you out. As much as I love you, I can't do it. There's no way I would do that for you. I'm sorry. And then after I'd been out of a coma for, I would say roughly at least 2 weeks. I was able to get out of bed and go to the bathroom and, take a crap. I know that's a little too much information, but you see, when you've been stopped up that long, it's great that you're able to do that and, be a regular person instead of just being stopped up and wondering when it's going to go away. Because after you've been in an induced coma or you become comatose, whichever which way things go in your life, medically, after you come out, it takes at least a week to 10 days to 2 weeks or longer than 2 weeks before you're able to go again. Because while you're in a coma, a lot of your body, even though you're not biologically dead, and even though you're still alive, a lot of your body shuts down and really doesn't operate. Your heart works. You can breathe out of your mouth. You probably breathe out of your nose at least a little bit, and you can, and even though you don't realize it, you can hear. But that's it. And if you open up your eyes, you're not going to open them up like this. You're going to only open them up about roughly, about like this. About that much. And anything you see, you can't see it very clearly, even if your mind is focusing on what you're trying to see. Trying to get actual vision and get sight of what you're trying to look at. And the day that I got out of intensive care, I went from the third, which was on the third floor. I went from the third floor to the seventh floor. And once I got on the seventh floor, the one thing that was nice is I wasn't restrained in what's called a gate, G-A-I-T, and held down. Anytime I wanted to get up and go use the bathroom, I could do it. But the main requirement or condition that I had to follow was I had to have a helmet on my head after I got up out of the bed so I could go in the bathroom and go do what I got to do. I mean, the nurses made me do that because of the brain injury I had. And that, and I believe it was 5 to 6 days after I got out of intensive care, a clinical specialist, I mean, that's the only type of medical doctor he would be, I would assume. His name was Dr. Montoya. He comes over to me and he says to me, do you know why you're here? Because see, the nurses and the doctors have to ask that question. I mean, it's their job to do that if you're suffering from a traumatic brain injury and you're recovering in the hospital before you can be discharged. And I said to him, because this is what I was actually genuinely thinking was happening at the time. I said to him, I guess it was because I had a bad reaction to the blood pressure medicine and Tylenol. He says, no. He says, you were hit by a car. And as soon as he tells me that, it all comes back of the day that I actually got hit by a car. Yes. And okay, so let me fast forward to after I'd been on the 7th floor for a while. So I was on the 7th floor for 10 days to 2 weeks. And then I got transferred from the 7th floor to the 8th floor, one floor up. And I was on the 8th floor for 1 week to 10 days, is the best guess I can make. And I believe it was either right before I got transferred from the 7th floor to the 8th floor, or I'd just been put in the 8th floor. Some people come, a man and a woman comes in, he says, okay, I'm gonna have to put this over your face, we're gonna have to put you under. And I says, why? I don't know why. You see, she has to give me that type of statement because of this. She's worried that if she gave me a description as to why I was being put under, that I'd get very belligerent and I'd freak out, and I'd put up resistance, trying to prevent them from putting the mask over my face that would breathe in the gas that would put me under. Yeah. And here's what happened after I actually got put under. They did the incision to open up the skin around the brain. Then they probably did some minor brain surgery in my brain. And then after that, they put the cap of my skull back. And they put a really special adhesive around the skull cap, or they stapled it in a few places, and they put an adhesive. It was one of the two. And then they sewed my head up. It was either this way or on the side of my head, one of the two. Yes, actually, now that I think about it, I think it was on the side of my head. And it opened up like that, instead of split in the middle, and it opens up like this. Okay, so after that, after the cap of the skull was put back and they sewed me up, they removed this tracheotomy tube. And after the tracheotomy tube was successfully removed, they did some cleaning, and then they did special surgery where they sewed up the inside of my throat, and then after that they sewed up outside. And then they did some other procedures before the surgery was complete, and they take me to a post-operation or post-surgery, post-op room, and they let me rest in there for a few hours, and then they take me back up into my room. And they might have given me a shot that would get me to wake up. I don't know. Am I going to ask them? No, because if they did, they're not going to tell me. It's against the bylaws and the ethics that they're supposed to closely follow to a letter about what they can tell a patient and what they can't tell a patient. You see. And anyways, after I was released from the 8th floor, I believe the date was June 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. And I went from the 8th floor to the 6th floor. Yeah. And the 8th floor, or excuse me, being on the 6th floor was really good, because I had a little more freedom to wander around. I couldn't wander around too much, and I couldn't just wander around the whole hospital and just do as I pleased. But I could wander around in the sense that I wouldn't have to wear a gown, and I could put on jeans and a t-shirt. And I wouldn't have to lay in the bed. I could sit up a little bit. And I could also, and I'd make sure to tell either a charge nurse or a nurse who was in the nurse's station. I would say, can I walk around up here? And they says, do you want to go downstairs? I said, no. I said, I'll stay up here and I'll walk around the circle. And I do that for like about a couple rounds, and then I go into my bedroom or into my hospital room, and I'd sit down, and if I didn't feel like watching TV, great. If not, I would turn the TV on, just flip through the channels till I found something I wanted to watch. And if I couldn't find anything I wanted to watch, I would just sit and daydream and think about all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Now here's what happens a week before I got released from the hospital. Okay, on June 20th, a Monday, my dad comes at a certain time, and then we all follow the neurology specialist and executive with the administrative office and two girls who were clinical specialists into a room so that we could have the meeting concerning me being discharged from the hospital. Now, after the meeting, or near just right before the meeting ended, it was confirmed that I would be released on Friday, June 24th at 12 p.m. Yep. And meanwhile, I just did exactly everything they told me to do. Yep. And the day that I get released from the hospital, I get on the phone, I dial like 3 or 4 digits to the food service people, and I have them take an order after looking at the menu of what I wanted to eat. And then about a half hour, 20 minutes to a half hour later, they serve the food. And then I ate that, and I just sat in there and I just waited and waited and waited and waited and waited and waited until I think it was somewhere between 11:15 and 11:30. My dad comes in, and then he signs a few things, and I sign a few things, and then they said, okay, you're good to go, you can go, you've been discharged, you can leave now. Go ahead and get your stuff. And I got my stuff. And then what happens is I follow him downstairs. It's not level 1, it's called G, ground level. And I go to, or no, he and I go to what's called an inpatient pharmacy. And there are 4 different prescriptions waiting for me. And he pays $4 and something for the prescription drugs. And then I put those in the duffel bag. And then I follow him to his car. And then what happens is he and I first stop off about, roughly about a half mile from the hospital at a place that was there then, but it's gone now. It was a nice Asian restaurant called Kokoro. And he ordered what he wanted to order, and I ordered a beef bowl with edamame and peanut oil dipping sauce, and tea or Coke or whatever soft drink I wanted. And then when we're done eating, we get back in this truck, and he drives 114 14 miles to his house in Pueblo, Colorado. Now I know I've done about 50 minutes of filming, so I'm going to hurry up and get to the end here. At the time that we arrived there, it was somewhere between 1 p.m. and 2:30 p.m. The exact time, I don't remember, because that was so long ago, 15 years ago. And I set my stuff down in the one of the two back bedrooms that he said he wanted me to sleep at for now, until his son-in-law left. And then I go and give a kiss and hug to Mary Rose, and then I say to my dad, I said, where's Penguin, the cat? He says, I think she's in the kitchen, go take a look. Or something to that effect. And she is. And I don't pick her up and hug her and go, because she wouldn't like that. But I just kind of bow my head down, and I just say, hi. I said, hi, Penguin. How are you? Yeah, I was in the hospital for almost 3 months, but I'm back here now. And I'm going to be living here. And when I finally am able to get an apartment in Denver, you're coming with me. You and I are going to be together. Or to that effect. Well, I think that's quite a lot for now. Thank you, everyone, for watching this vlog. I know this particular one's been a long one. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you've not subscribed already. And goodbye now. It's wonderful to be alive. Thank you.